Hey everyone, she's Sarah Hoke, Librarian for Collection Development Management, and I'm Colleen Cressman, Librarian for Open Publishing. Today we'll be talking about one way we support no-fee open access at Harvard Library.
So this is just a brief look at what we plan to cover today, aligning with the desired outcomes from this presentation. We'll give a bit of context about our library structure and how it relates to this activity, and then also some quick information about the type of open access material we're talking about. Then dive into our workflows and some specific examples of our work. About the library, Colleen and I come from two different departments at Harvard, OSRDS and HNSS Collection Development, which are described on the screen here. My unit's work has a subject-specific focus and relates to more classic collection development. As time has gone by, this has involved more open access material as publishers continue to bring OA objectives to the library for funding. Colleen is typically working with broader and bigger OA projects for the library, but these more subject-specific items will come up either in collection development and are brought to her for insight, or come across her desk and then she pulls in collection development. That's where the intersection of our two departments really comes in, as something more subject-specific would be the responsibility of a subject-specific workflow. But Colleen has the expertise to determine the value of the OA component and how well it aligns with the library's overarching goals on that front. Speaking of our open access goals, I'll pass it to Colleen to dive into a bit more detail there.
Thanks, Sarah. So always useful is Peter Suber's scalar definition of open access, which encompasses gratis OA and Libre OA. OA for most of us, most of the time, is OA in this second sense, even if we don't call it Libre. This is access that is both free of charge and free of at least some copyright and licensing restrictions. It encompasses a wide variety of models and comes in many degrees. Next slide. We're interested in a specific form of OA publishing, often called Diamond OA, but which we refer to a little more descriptively, even if a little more generically, as no-fee OA. No-fee OA publishing is accomplished without levying fees on the author side for publishing the version of record open access from the publisher's main venue. Additionally, this sort of OA publishing doesn't turn on the author's affiliation with a given institution. Any author can submit without having to worry about corresponding author status or whether their institution has an agreement in place. This genus of publishing includes no-fee Diamond OA journals as a species, where operational costs are often underwritten by individual libraries or consortia. If fee-based OA publishing is akin to paying retail prices, then underwriting no-fee OA is akin to wholesale. Next slide. So moving into the heart of our topic today, we're discussing one of the workflows belonging to a program we call OA sponsorships. In a nutshell, OA sponsorships are financial contributions provided by Harvard Library in support of external OA initiatives. These initiatives don't charge authors, readers, or users any fees, and they are, of course, high quality in that they comply with standards and best practices. And while the program itself also covers tools, resources, and infrastructure, our discussion today pertains to journals or collections outside of traditional collections workflows and not already offered by major publishers through existing library-side arrangements. Turning back to you, Sarah.
All right, so we'll talk briefly about the life cycle. With all of that in mind, let's look a little bit more closely about the work we're talking about. Funny enough, it doesn't look that different from, say, a patron request, though of course the requester is not a patron, and who performs the different parts of the life cycle are different as well. This life cycle can span multiple years, though much of it can happen on a shorter time frame. It is mainly the fifth step that can draw out the timeline. We'll look at these more closely on the next slide where we dive into the workflow. Colleen?
After receiving a request from a candidate journal, I conduct a preliminary check just to make sure it's minimally appropriate for the program. Moving on to the evaluation next, this stage can involve meetings with the editor-in-chief or other library stakeholders, like my colleague Sarah, in addition to back and forth correspondence with the journal and my scouring the journal's public documentation. For the internally developed factors of my assessment, I employ a mix of descriptive and evaluative criteria across 8 categories. These categories are the mission of the resource, bibliographic information, governance, copyright and Creative Commons licensing, policies, guidance, and procedures, availability of the resource, preservation and indexing, and finally, activity statistics. For the external factors, I use the Principles of Transparency and Best Practice published by COPE, the DOAJ, OASPA, and the WAME. Once complete, I send off my evaluation in the form of a recommendation report to the appropriate deciders in collection development, which in this case is Sarah.
That's when we turn to making the decision. By now we've already identified that subject-wise, the content is appropriate for my unit to review. Reviewing the assessment is more about confirming the type and quality of OA we would be supporting and how it is made available to users. Harvard has an institution-wide digital accessibility policy, which the library aims to comply with. The goal is that all digital materials we provide to users would either be WCAG 2.1 level AA compliant and would have a VPAT or other documentation to confirm it, or that the supplier can provide an action plan on how they will work towards becoming compliant. At the very least, we'd need them to confirm that if requested, they could provide a more accessible format on a one-time basis. Ideally, we'd also see the content being preserved somewhere, for example with clocks or Portico. And finally, we'd need to make sure this is something we can support continuously, so we'd review our current budget and discuss the future to ensure, as best we can, this is something we can support in the long term. Next, activating the resource. Once we've decided, collection development works with our e-resources department to make it official. E-resources coordinates payment of resource and also is guided by collection development instructions and permission to use the budget. At the request of collection development, e-resources may also add a link to the library catalog if it's not already there. Many resources are already listed in DOAJ, for example, where we pull OA information to include in our catalog already. And then finally, ensuring continuity. This is mostly about coordinating invoicing over time, depending on the group we are working with. They might be more familiar or not with providing annual invoicing for a recurring resource, so we might need to give them a reminder to provide us the invoice. Subsequent years might need different funding applied as things fluctuate, or we might call for reevaluation as time goes by. All important steps that could be missed if we didn't account for this in our initial workflow. And just looking at the effort level below, in 4 and 5, these are marked as medium effort, mostly because it requires 2 staff people to keep track of those items. They are not necessarily a particularly heavy lift, but takes time to coordinate and sometimes operate outside our more standard workflows, meaning the individual effort to keep track of it is higher. On to our case studies. Colleen?
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to speak to one of the more interesting aspects of our first case study in Ergo. Ergo aimed to raise enough funds from philosophy departments and libraries to offset expenses entirely, including copy editing, typesetting, and publishing in both PDF and HTML. At the time, the campaign requested just $200 per year from PhD granting institutions. However, we were unsure the journal would have been able to meet its funding goal with this suggested contribution amount, given that that would have required participation from 50% of all PhD granting institutions in the English-speaking world. That seemed like a pretty high threshold. So we made some calculations with an estimated cost model that we made that factored in Ergo's provided operational setup and expense allocations. While this meant I would be recommending a contribution beyond the journal's own ask, financially supporting a fully OA not-for-profit journal requires adjusting that locus of value from that of the research output alone to that of the research output in conjunction with its production and other relevant factors such as fairness to authors and adherence to best practices in OA publishing. So financial contributions to journals like Ergo and Free and Equal, which Sarah will speak to, represent greater returns on investment compared to traditional subscription publishing and even to other OA publishing schemes like read and publish models that are more transactional and less concerned with providing a fee-free, non-commercial publishing route for all authors, regardless of institutional affiliation. Back to you, Sarah.
All right, to talk about Free and Equal now. In this case, we heard directly from the journal that they were looking for additional support to cover some activity that was not covered with other funding they had secured, namely being able to hire a managing editor so they could maintain their workflow for triple anonymous peer review. While the journal was technically new with no published articles, it actually had a strong history with the entire staff coming from philosophy and public affairs, with a clearly stated desire to encourage no-fee open access in the academic space. It was unsurprising then that they tracked very highly in terms of the criteria we reviewed for our assessment. And again, even though quote-unquote new, They brought the proven track record of subject, concept, and the current staff capabilities from the previous journal, which allowed us to identify anticipated metrics for this new publication, such as number of articles published and general volume of submission. We also have a fair bit of faculty affiliation with Free and Equal, which was definitely an important factor in our decision as well. Despite Free and Equal being the second journal we reviewed together, there was a different type of learning curve with this assessment. The ask came directly from the journal this time, and the publication was interdisciplinary in nature, which meant coordinating across different library departments who handle those subject areas for collecting. Then decisions were made separately by those departments and had to be coordinated. And our support was technically an ask on top of existing funding from the library, since we support OLH at a broader level, which meant a different explanation to justify the cost internally. There were definitely good things and some tricky things about this workflow we created, and we wanted to talk about both sides of that. For the challenges, first, this was new to us. While we've established a workflow, this really started with an opportunity and an idea of what was possible, but it took some time to sort that into something we could call a workflow. With plenty to keep us busy otherwise, it was sometimes a struggle to find the time to put towards this valuable endeavor. Second, staff time is a bit steep. While it isn't unreasonable to have 3 staff members working on new acquisition activity, the fact that these were for a single journal each time does make the ratio of staff time to added benefit kind of high. Again, though, this is something that should improve over time and has proven worth that initial effort. As for coordination, sometimes knowing all the proper people that should be involved at each juncture is tough. Kind of a champagne problem, I know, really, with the staffing levels we have, but still a challenge. If something is interdisciplinary, it is a balance to make sure all the proper folks are involved and that the work keeps moving forward, especially because we weren't really given timeframes from the journal about when a decision was needed. This made the decision process drag in some places. And finally, there's definitely the consideration of our growth plans. It's about how we consider expanding the workflow. As noted, the staff time is a little steep, and if there were more opportunities running through this workflow, that would reduce the costliness of the work. However, this is also work that we all take on in addition to regular duties. To be fair, it is an extension of that work. But the question is how to make this scalable. This is something we're still working to figure out. The benefits, though, I do think still far outweigh the challenges. First of all, flexibility. These are commitments that don't come with multi-year contracts or bundled with other content, and in both cases, we set what we felt was a reasonable dollar amount for support, meaning we could make it fit our budget. The assessment allowed us to identify what would be a meaningful contribution for content we were specifically interested in, but was not a firm restriction to the support level. Transparency. By far one of the best parts. We were in contact directly with the journals, and in both cases, they were very open with information that helped us understand why they were asking for support in the first place. It was just so refreshing. It made it very easy to justify why we wanted to pursue these opportunities, and there were fewer middle people to sort of muddy the process or bog down that info gathering step. This also, as we've kind of talked about already, really does align with our mission at Harvard, that these were both no-fee open access opportunities, and that's something that's very well fit into our goals. Despite the different workflow and staff time involved, identifying quality journals and making them accessible to our users is still very much a core value, and this was an opportunity to combine our core work with our larger goals.
So thanks so much, everybody, for listening to our presentation. We look forward to chatting with you in the Q&A session on Thursday, October 16th from 2:40 to 3. You can also email us at the addresses listed there. Thanks so much.